I was just a 19-year-old farmer when I found a billionaire's sister bleeding at the side of the mountain where she had gone to hike. Helping her saved her life, but it also put my family's farm in danger. This land was everything to me, dirt under my nails, and with dreams no one believed in. I didn't know that one moment would change my future, or force me to choose between the farm and a life I never imagined. The earth has a way of speaking to those who listen. It hums beneath bare feet, whispers through rustling leaves, and sighs when rain softens its skin. I grew up hearing those sounds, learning their meanings, and loving them more than anything else in the world. My name is Crystal Adams, and at 19, I already know that farming is not just a livelihood, it's my identity. My mother and I run a farm on the outskirts of Abuja, a land that once belonged to my grandfather. After he passed, Mom left her teaching job and returned home to fulfill his wish, keep the land alive. For me, though, it wasn't about fulfilling anyone's wish. I loved farming long before I understood inheritance or a legacy. I loved the smell of wet soil, the ache in my arms after a long day, the thrill of watching something grow because I tended it. We cultivated corn and wheat as our annual crops, beetroot and sugar beet as our biennials, and grapevines and sugarcane as our perennials. Our farm supplied a local wine company, and during peak seasons, we hired up to 50 workers. Mom and I understood every inch of that land, every stubborn patch, every fertile corner, every tree that leaned a little too far east. But my heart was set on something new, something bold. For a year, I had been experimenting with a hybrid crop, a cross between coffee and cocoa. A plant that could meet in the middle, offering a flavor profile that would make taste buds dance. I could already imagine the market for it, the possibilities, the innovation. But we didn't have enough land to expand the experiment, and acquiring land in Abuja was a political labyrinth Mom refused to enter. Still, I believed in my idea, and I believed the earth would make room for it somehow. I just didn't know that somehow would arrive in the form of a bleeding stranger at the foot of a hill. Mom and I were driving home in our ragged, rattling truck, the kind that coughed before starting and wheezed before stopping, when I saw something that made me yell, "Mom, stop!" A young woman lay crumpled at the base of a hill, her clothes torn, her side bleeding. She was unconscious, her hair a vivid, impossible green that glowed even in the fading sunlight. We jumped out of the truck. "Crystal, first aid box," Mom barked. I was already reaching for it. Her wound was deep but not fatal. We cleaned it with our homemade antiseptic, packed it with herbs, and wrapped it tightly. Mom made her drink bitter leaf juice, our go-to remedy for internal bleeding. "We can't move her far," Mom said. "The road is too rough. She'll bleed more." So we built a makeshift canopy with sticks and a tarp from the truck, then sat beside her, waiting. When she finally stirred, her eyes darted wildly. Where am I? Who are you?" I smiled gently. "I'm Crystal. This is my mom. You're safe." She blinked, confused, then whispered, "I'm Alyona. Alyona Buttland." Mom and I exchanged a look. Buttland? As in the Buttland family, the real estate giants who own nearly a fifth of the state's property market? She told us everything. How she'd been hiking with her boyfriend. How he'd been pestering her to convince her family to join a new real estate development deal. How he'd stopped noticing her, even after she dyed her hair green, because he was too busy chasing money through her connections. "I was stupid," she cried softly. "I thought he loved me." "You weren't stupid," Mom said. "You were trusting." When she felt stable enough, she asked us to call the hospital and request her personal doctor. She gave us his number, and within an hour, he was on his way to our home. That was when she said, "I feel good here, close to nature." Without thinking, I blurted out, "You're going to love our house then." She smiled. "Let's go." Our home wasn't big or fancy, but it was alive. Literally. The walls were covered in creeping vines, passionflower, ivy, and a stubborn crawler my grandfather had planted decades ago. They wrapped the house like a green shawl, their tendrils curling around windows and wooden beams. The roof was tin, but softened by hanging baskets overflowing with ferns and trailing plants. The porch was shaded by a massive bougainvillea that burst with purple blooms, its branches forming a natural archway. Inside, the air smelled of earth and herbs. Dried leaves hung from the ceiling in bundles: mint, lemongrass, basil, and bitterleaf. The furniture was handmade from local wood, polished smooth by years of use. Sunlight filtered through woven curtains, casting leafy shadows on the clay-tiled floor. Alyona's eyes widened. This is magical. Her doctor arrived shortly after, stepping into our vine-wrapped world with a look of surprise. He examined her, praised our first aid work, and gave her medication. She slept deeply, wrapped in one of Mom's thick woven blankets. By morning, she was almost glowing. "I need to go home," she said. "My family must be panicking." We drove her back, and when we reached the Buttland estate, my jaw nearly fell off. The mansion looked like something out of a futuristic architectural magazine. A sweeping structure of glass walls framed with brushed gold steel, reflecting the sky like a giant mirror. The driveway was lined with palm trees trimmed so perfectly they looked sculpted. A fountain in the shape of a twisting helix shot water 20 feet into the air. The front doors were massive slabs of dark oak with gold handles shaped like vines. Inside, the floors were polished marble, the ceilings high enough to swallow echoes, and the chandeliers looked like frozen fireworks. Alyona's family rushed to her, hugging her, scolding her, crying over her. Then she introduced us. "They saved my life," she said. That was when I saw him. Jude Buttland, her older brother. He was tall, unfairly tall, with a chiseled jawline that looked like it had been carved by a sculptor who was showing off. His hair was thick, dark, and slightly tousled, like he'd just run his hands through it. His eyes were ocean blue, the kind that made you forget what you were saying. He wore a simple white shirt and black trousers, but somehow looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury fashion campaign. He thanked us warmly, his voice deep and steady. We stayed for lunch, and I really tried not to stare at him. But every time he smiled, my heart did a weird somersault. When Mom announced we had to return to the farm, he looked genuinely curious. "You're farmers?" he asked. "Yes," I said quickly before Mom could answer. "You don't look like farmers," he said, then turned to Mom. "Respectfully, Ms. Adams, all the farmers I know are never this lovely." Then he flashed me a smile. My water went down the wrong pipe. I coughed like I was dying. Mom practically dragged me out of the mansion. I was mortified. A month passed. No calls. No visits. No green-haired heiress. No ocean-eyed billionaire heir. I assumed they had moved on. Until a sleek black Tesla rolled up to our farmhouse one afternoon. Jude stepped out. My heart did that somersault again. He explained that a real estate proposal had reached his desk. A proposal to buy up a large stretch of land, including our farm, to build an amusement park. The proposal had come from Alyona's ex-boyfriend, bypassing her entirely. I exploded. "They want to destroy our farm?" He raised his hands. "That's why I'm here. I wanted to hear your thoughts." Mom invited him in for coffee beet, our family's odd but beloved mix of coffee and beetroot. He loved it. "Asked for more," I teased. "Wait until you taste what I'm planning, a cross between coffee and cocoa." His eyebrows lifted. "What experimentation?" "Come," he said, gesturing toward the door. "Walk with me. Tell me everything." We stepped outside into the warm afternoon air. The vines on our house rustled softly, as if listening. Jude didn't rush me. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, giving me space to talk. And I did, passionately. I told him about the hybridization process, the challenges, the potential flavor profile, the market possibilities. I told him how I dreamed of creating something new, something the world hadn't tasted before. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he stopped walking and turned fully toward me. "Passion like yours shouldn't be wasted, Crystal." My stomach fluttered. Then he added, "I'll make sure you and your mom don't lose your farm. And I want to invest in your experimental crop." I didn't think. I just jumped into his arms. He wasn't expecting it. We both toppled to the ground. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry." I scrambled up, mortified again. He stood, brushing dirt off his shirt, which now had a huge stain. "Will you ever forgive me?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "on one condition." "What condition?" "That you go on a date with me." Inside, I was screaming yes, yes, yes. But I forced myself to play it cool. I said, "Only if you promise to pick me up and bring me back. I'm not driving our truck to wherever you live." He laughed. "Deal. I'll call you." Our first date was magical. He took me to a quiet rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. We talked for hours, about farming, about business, about life. He wasn't arrogant or snobbish. He was thoughtful, curious, and surprisingly grounded. 4 weeks later, we were officially dating. 3 months later, we signed a partnership deal for my experimental farm. He invested generously, but insisted the intellectual property remain mine. 6 months later, the new farm site was under construction, a sprawling research-friendly space with greenhouses, irrigation systems, and soil labs. And on our 1-year anniversary, under the grapevine archway my grandfather had planted decades ago, Jude got down on one knee. The diamond rings sparkled like a captured star. "Crystal Adams," he said, "you changed my life the moment you saved my sister. You changed it again when you showed me what passion looks like. Will you marry me?" I didn't even try to play it cool this time. "Yes," I cried, throwing my arms around him. The farm girl, no, the farm entrepreneur, the inventor, was going to marry a billionaire. And the earth beneath my feet felt like it was smiling.